check the Robotics and then get started.
Cool.
And work on your stand-up.
Got like a 3 or 4 minute routine pretty dialed in. So we'll kick off with that. You know Dave Morris. He ran drugs at Intel. He was a unique. He's got a friend of his here in town, Tom Singer. He helps found his books. He's got like a publishing company and all that. He started doing stand-up, and just like has like a challenge to himself to do it. And now he's been doing it for like a year and a half. And he has like a 5-minute set that he goes to these open mic nights. He's like 55 years old, dude. Just started doing stand-up.
No better way to get on stage.
I guess he was like, he trained people in like public speaking and stuff like that. And so yeah, he's like, it's hard.
You should try that.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
You stand-up challenge.
Stand-up challenge.
We can get some people to do
So I guess this must be the top floor.
So you get to the secret penthouse with the
That's right.
drone launch pad.
The drone landing pad.
That's right.
Like you guys in HQ that you're building?
What about it? Is there a new headquarters?
Well, about how like you can launch all these drones from like different floors and things like that.
It's going to be a pretty insane building.
Yeah.
We had some 360s of, like from the outside as they were building it up. It looked pretty rad.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like, it definitely doesn't look like somewhere I've gone fly with drones though.
Yeah, like, pretty downtown urban.
All right. How are you guys? Good. Excellent. This is pretty amazing. Most of the time when we have these AMAs, I see a lot more people who look right out of college than I see today. So this is very cool. So, a little bit, just because of this fact, we want to know a little bit about you guys. How many of you have been through a tour of Capital Factory? That's a lot. Who are Capital Factory members? Okay. Couple. South by Southwest, I'm sure everybody has been there. Who went to UT Austin? How many can actually recognize this organization I'm repping?
And now.
All right, okay. So AIAA out of Austin, part of that. Who recently moved to Austin? Just one? Wow. Okay.
It's all very relevant.
Who was born in Austin? All right. Anyone looking for jobs? Always. Who's looking for investors?
Always.
Who is a founder of a startup? I'll make it even more specific. Founder of a startup in the drones or robotics area. All right, that's actually very cool. So what we'll cover, and before we get to drones and robotics, we'll cover a few things about Capital Factory Texas Startup Manifesto here. And of course, we gotta do this before we get into the meat of the discussion here, right? So we'll cover all of these. What we will not cover today, and these are things that happen regularly at Capital Factory. We won't be talking about fundraising with VCs. We won't be talking all of these, how to become a mentor investor. All of these are available at different events at Capital Factory, so you can come back to those, so we won't be spending too much time on that, right? And this one, any of you have been to Founders Academy with Gordon? So something that I really recommend to a lot of founders who are either first-time founders or even repeat founders, Gordon does this great lunch and learn every quarter at Capital Factory. and this is really great for people who are looking to start a company, to learn the basics of practically everything that you need to know. And I really wish I had something like that before I found my first company. And of course, we plug into the startup scene here. You can go to the Capital Factory site for all the upcoming, and I'm running through these because I know there are a lot of questions about drones and robotics. So with one of the things that we always hear about Capital Factory and its relevance in the world, where most people, when they think about cool startups, they start thinking about Bay Area, right? So what is it that ties us here together, right? How many of you are familiar with this term called Texas Startup Manifesto? Anybody? So a couple of years back, Capital Factory has been around for quite some time, and we've done fairly well in Austin as the center of gravity of all startups here, right? Practically, we get to see everything that gets started in Austin. We looked around and we felt like there is something missing about this, right? And Josh came up with this whole thing called the Texas Startup Manifesto. And what the Texas Startup Manifesto is let's take what we have done in Austin and combine it under the whole Texas umbrella, right? If you look at Texas, it's a huge market by itself. We may not be able to compete Austin to Bay Area, but as Texas, definitely we would be able to compete, right? So the Texas Startup Manifesto, and it's on the web, texasstartupmanifesto.com. You will see the details on that, and all it is about is take the success that we've had in Austin and try to spread that to Houston, try to spread it to Dallas, San Antonio, and bring that all into one umbrella. Since the time we have published this, Capital Factory has opened a full-blown office, which is as much as big as the one here in Austin, in Dallas, right? On a regular basis, we take these road shows out to Dallas, San Antonio, Houston. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we have a bus going from here to Fort Worth, right? As part of that Texas Startup Manifesto. Houston, we are partnering with Station Houston as well as the Canon, and we have a really good presence now with Houston and the medical community there, the healthcare and all of that community there. San Antonio, of course, is the nearest to us, and we have been fairly involved with them and engaged them. So that brings us together under that whole Texas Startup Manifesto, right? And of course, Austin has done really well for us here. Most of you are from Austin, so I will actually try to skip these slides as quick as possible, right? And we all know about Apple building a new campus here. Their Army moving here has been really good. Got lots of people. If you haven't been to our eighth floor, that's all about defense companies, right? All the companies that are related to defense industry, and all the events that are happening there are all around the defense industry. Of course, we owe a lot, and this is something not many people know, but MCC in Austin is one of the oldest, I would assume, of accelerator incubator programs in the whole country. Even before it was a lot of the startups around and everything. And I keep meeting people who were involved with MCC from that time frame, right?
So are you guys connected with MCC, or is that just?
So we have a good connection with IC Square, part of UC, more than MCC. But of course, we owe a lot to MCC here. Whole Foods, Dell, HomeAway, Indeed, WP Engine, which again, many of you may not know this, but WP Engine is where Capital Factory pretty much was, both of these were born together in the same floor, in this building on the 8th floor, right? And many of the early mentors who were involved with Capital Factory were also very involved with WP Engine. Some of them had invested money, which did really well for the overall economy here. And
Bumble, Tinder, Grinder,
yeah.
all here in Austin.
Kendra Scott, and of course Capital Factory, the center of gravity. One of the things that you'll see with Capital Factory is every day you're seeing a lot of this, right? A handful of local angel investors, venture capital, not just from within Texas, but we are getting regular visitors from outside. One of the things that Josh did a few months back was he did a bus tour of investors coming from California, coming from Bay Area, coming from Toronto, and had this whole bus go around to all of these cities in Texas and meet various startups, right? So we are getting a lot of that, and of course we have had several high-profile CEOs come out to Capital Factory, and many of us have been in their during their seminars here. Tim Cook, Satya Nadella from Microsoft. President Obama pretty much kicked that process out here in 2013 when he first showed up. And of course, there are always, like I said, on the 8th floor, there are always Army generals, and you'll see all kinds of people around here at Capital Factory. Of course, we have UT Austin pretty involved, lots of different mentors with every kind of area that you can think of are involved with Capital Factory. And Texas Venture Labs. These are all the events in and around Austin. If you're familiar with Austin Startup Week is coming up soon. This is again a celebration of all startups in Austin. And we have startup crawl that during the week. We have all kinds of different things going on, events overall for the Austin Startup Week. Most of us are familiar with South by Southwest, which officially it looks like this when you actually tell your manager that you want to go to South by Southwest, and unofficially it looks like that. And of course, during South by Southwest, we have a pretty large startup crawl going on, both here as well as citywide in Austin, right? Army Futures Command. How many of you are familiar with Army Futures Command? Right. So these guys have done a really good job by choosing Austin, and it was one of their last stops before they decided to come to Austin. So we feel really good about that, and that Capital Factory actually had something to do with that. And all of these slides are available at these links. When you signed up for Eventbrite, you should have actually seen these in the Eventbrite too, right? So you'll see all that information. And that said, let's get started with the drones and robotics. Any question on the stuff that we talked about so far? Anything that you would like to ask before we jump into this?
Who wants to give me some money for my next startup?
Yeah.
Yes.
What is your t-shirt again?
So it's American Institute of Aerospace and Aeronautics, and this is my tribute to my daughter, who is part of UT Austin. She's one of the VPs of the organization. She's the reason I am as big a fan of robotics and drones. So, yeah. Cool. Any other
part
questions?
of the aerial robotics team too? The UT aerial robotics team?
No, she's been in Texas Space Lab. She's been with the Hyperloop, not with the UAV robotics.
You should have told her to check them out.
Yeah.
Put in a good word for her.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that. Yeah. So she's right now at Lockheed doing skunk works.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So, cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming. It's a great turnout.
So Colin, you want to talk a little bit about yourself before we jump into questions?
Well, I'll keep it brief. I started building drones in my garage maybe like 12 or 13 years ago. Big helicopters, putting cameras on them, taking aerial photos. Then we started doing aerial video. And then I think we were one of the first outfits out in LA where we had full-scale helicopters and drones, and we were shooting movies and TV shows and things like that. But we could really see the difference between the kind of quality we could get from full-scale helicopter gimbals like the Cineflex and the Gyron, and what we were getting on drones, which was really, really bad. And we knew there was a really, a huge demand for this. And that was by far the earliest commercial adopter of drone technology, and is still by far the leading use of commercial drones, and will be for probably another couple of years, is production and content creation. And so we saw that there was an opportunity to develop some kind of miniaturized, stabilized system. I met with a bunch of engineering firms here in the States and got giant quotes and bids for making prototypes. And DJI at the time was a 13-person engineering team that made a little autopilot system we were using on our helicopters. And the founder and I are like the exact same age. We knew each other. He just loved remote control helicopters. And I hit them up and said, hey, you've already got all these stability algorithms. Do you think you could use them to like make a gimbal that would point better and give us more stable footage? Because if we had that, like every single movie would use drones. And he was like, it would be too expensive. No one wants to pay that much money for gimbals. And so we went out there and we actually ended up hiring them as a contract engineering firm to build a stabilized gimbal for our aerial photography company. And because their bid was literally 1/10 of the least expensive bid that I had here, I couldn't afford any of the engineering companies here. So we made a prototype. About 6-9 months later, it was the very first 3-axis brushless stabilized gimbal. It was actually for a Sony FS100 camera and flew on a helicopter. But it was for the first time ever you could go fly one of these toy helicopters around and get perfectly stable imagery. And we knew that that would really change the game. So we decided to, instead of being the only aerial photography company out there that had that, we should bring that to market and offer it to all aerial photography companies. And so I became the founder and CEO of DJI North America. And then I was the Chief Innovation Officer for DJI Global. So what we did here in the US was really understand the market and the customer and what people wanted from their drones. And so we did all the interface with the market. And so we had a pretty powerful 1-2 punch in that we had the market understanding and we did all the branding and all the content and all the kind of sales and marketing strategy for the global company. And I oversaw kind of product definition and would kind of like, no, that's too expensive for that particular feature, or no, it's worth spending the extra cogs to get to this capability. And we started making drones, and we saw that there was an opportunity. Actually, we accidentally created the consumer drone market. We were selling like $15,000, $20,000 drone systems, and we realized that there was a big barrier that what we wanted to do was get out of people that were like building remote control helicopters in their garage, and we wanted to get into like production houses. And there was a big kind of fear around really just wasting their time and money. Like a lens could easily cost more than 15 grand. So they weren't super concerned about the price tag. It was just, well, if I'm gonna spend 3 weeks learning how to build this thing and get it all programmed, and then if I go crash at my second flight, I'm gonna look like an idiot. I will have wasted a bunch of time and money. So that was like a big limiting factor. So we started building little DJI F330 flame wheels and putting little GoPro gimbals, or not gimbals, GoPro holders on it, little Futaba 8FJ, the remote, the battery, the charger. We program it with a little Wukong M, a little NASA, and we kind of had this whole kit and go, okay, look, for $1,000, here's a little starter drone, and you can get a sense of putting a camera around in 3D space, see how you like it. If you like it, then you can buy the $15,000 version. It's just going to shoot much better quality footage, but it flies just the same. And that quadrupled our conversion rate. So we went from, DJI was doing like $3 million in revenue, and when we launched our first stabilized gimbal system, I guess 2012 was the first year we were selling that. We went up to like 20 million in revenue. And then through 2012, we started building these little kits, and that was really working toward the second half of the year. So I said, hey, look, just put a plastic shell around these components, stick it all in one box, make it like a 30-minute thing to get this thing ready to fly, and I think we could sell this to like camera shops. And so then I went up and down the West Coast to all the places we had been buying lenses and camera gear from for years, and got the, like, look, just buy 4 of these, right? And this was the Phantom 1.
Yeah.
And I would do a whole dog and pony and try to talk them into buying 4 units, and anyone that bought them just immediately sold out. I remember one funny story is B&H ended up hearing about it like about a month in, and we sent them like 24 units, which was like a pretty big initial order, and like 72 hours they sold out. So they were like, oh, we need another 50 units or 60 units, something like that. We're like, oh wow. So we sent them that, and then like 3 days after that, Saul, their buyer, calls me. He's like, how many can you put on a container? 960. He's like, here's my credit card. So we did like a 960 unit order on his credit card on the spot. I was like, we're gonna need to hire some more people. We're like 10 people in a little office on Anderson.
Oh my God.
And so then we ended up doing like 130 million in revenue that next year with the Phantom 1. Started working with GoPro and others. We did like 450 million in 2014. They're now a multi-billion-dollar company. I left in 2014. I think when they went from doing 3 million in revenue to doing on track to doing $1 billion in revenue, the board all started caring a lot more. They had a bunch of like adult board members in Shenzhen that were like, oh, cute little drone company. And then when they started seeing these numbers, now all of a sudden everyone was paying attention. They were like, who's this guy in Texas that has 48% of North America? And time to change that deal. So, you know, as it goes. So I ended up leaving DJI 2014. I still have a great relationship with Frank. We're still good friends. Ended up going to 3DR, developed another drone there called the Solo. And so I think what we were trying to do with the Solo, again, is just like always listening to the market. At that time, we realized that the Phantom was no longer a trainer drone. It was a way that people were actually capturing content. But what we noticed is that you could either spend $15,000 on like a drone and camera 2-man operation with retractable gear and a camera pilot and a drone pilot, and capture really compelling looking shots that you would use in a piece of production, or you could use a Phantom and you could capture 1-axis shots, pushing in, going straight up, strafing across, but you couldn't do anything dynamic. It just was very, very difficult with one operator. So we're like, man, how could we allow one user, and again, this is all like against the backdrop of Amazing Race, which I had done like years and years before, and I kept trying to develop cooler drones for them to travel around the world and capture shots with. So we're like, how could you build like one drone that could fit in a backpack, and a beginner drone pilot that's never flown before, within 3 days, they could go capture really compelling shots. That was our mission in creating the Solo. So we ended up building in Linux computers, and we took off-the-shelf technology like Waypoint, you know, planning and autonomous flight control, but we built it into a user experience of kind of real-time shot creation, where you could just target something and hit a button and would start orbiting it perfectly. And if you increase the altitude, the gimbal would automatically tilt down. If you decreased or increased the radius of the circle, the gimbal would automatically tilt to point at the object. And so you could create these really dynamic shots, or you create multi-point cable cam where you set different keyframes, and you could fly really poorly between your keyframes, set your keyframes, and then hit play, and it would just do this really beautiful dynamic shot with automatic smoothing on your start and stop. And so that was kind of a pretty cool tech that we came out with Solo. Now, of course, so we grew 3DR from less than 5 million to 100 million in sales in like 18 months. We were the first drone at Best Buy. We were the first drone at big box retail around the world. We had like 2,700 retail locations. And what we learned really quickly is that if you're a fully Silicon Valley based company, this company was in Berkeley, and we had 35 people or so here in Austin as a sales and marketing team. We learned that if you're contract engineering everything and you're contract manufacturing everything, and the motors that we're buying for Solo, we're paying $9.80 to PCH, who's paying J-Bill, who's paying Tiger Motor, who's selling us Sunny Sky Motors, right? And like, we know where these motors are coming from, but we cannot just pay Sunny Sky $4 for a motor. And we're competing against DJI, who is DJI employee, buying copper, winding their own motors in their own factories for like $1.60 a motor. And so that was a very interesting battle, and learning where strengths and weaknesses lie, especially when you're competing on price. When we launched Solo, we were at $1,400. It was $1,000 for Solo, $400 for the gimbal, and then you still had to buy a GoPro. And $1,000 for Solo, they were coming off the line at $608. So we're selling them for $675 to retail stores. We're not making a bunch of money on this. We're just trying to build a market. And DJI, we actually outsold DJI for like the first 3 or 4 months. They launched Phantom 3 at exactly the same time we launched Solo. And so DJI went from $1,200 to $499 over the course of 5 months with their newest drone. They're like, cool, we'll just drop the bottom out of the market and we can just take a no margin product here for a while. So it was a really great learning experience of just getting your ass kicked in the market. And knowing that we couldn't chase them down on price. And so it just, at $1,400 versus $1,200, it was kind of like, hey, smart shots are really cool. $1,400 plus a GoPro versus $499 with built-in light bridge. It was like, I'll just figure it out with my fingers, you know. So DJI or 3DR decided to get out of hardware. So we did kind of, Chris was with me there. We ended up doing like a 9-month wind out of hardware and built SiteScan with Autodesk because they wanted to really start focusing on analytics and construction, as planned versus as built. So we kind of started going back into the more commercial world, which we had been in years before. And then I ended up, most of the team there at 3DR Austin, we founded a company called Hangar here in Austin, which is kind of drones as a service, robotics as a service company using autonomous flight control to capture really consistent data sets and then use an automated workflow to process these data sets for construction sites and critical infrastructure, cell towers, stuff like that. And then about 2 years ago, we started Gwin Partners because there was a number of companies around the world that had technologies and innovations that were really leading edge, and they just weren't really sure how to shape those into really compelling products that would have a solid product market fit and would like fill a specific customer need in the market. And they also didn't know how to tell their story and open up revenue lines and find test customers and then go meet with those customers and document their ROI cases and then share that with other potential customers. Like that whole process of getting revenue was foreign to like these teams of engineers that were developing these really incredible technologies. And so we started Gwin Partners with kind of a core team of people that had worked with me, some of them from before DJI and then through DJI, 3DR, Hangar. And we have a small team at Gwin Partners, maybe like 18 to 20 full-time, and some contractors we work with. And we have anywhere from 15 to 20 clients. Actually, Jason back there is one of my partners. He runs all of our government engagement stuff. And you're going to end up talking some because we're going to start talking about government and Army Futures Command and the new designation of drones because this is like very important stuff. But we have maybe 15 to 20 clients at a time, maybe half from the US, half from around the world, and we get to just work on really cool stuff. You know, Matt Chasen here in town, we've been helping him build a manned drone, which is a super fun project. And we've got, you know, Precision Autonomy is a client, they're here in town. We only have maybe, who else is in town?
Pensa is in town.
Pensa Systems, not officially a client, but Richard and I work together. I love these guys, and you guys are crushing it. And so I think we've got a lot of drone stuff happening in town. I mean, even now, like with Atrius here, we got DroneLink here, we got Hangar here, we have Pensa Systems, Precision Autonomy, Lift Aircraft, aerial applications. They're right downtown. We've got SeekOps now, DavTech. I mean, there's
you
several
just
others.
Published a commercial drone report from Gwin Partners.
We did one a little over a year ago, and it was kind of like, here's what's going on in industry, here's what people are developing, tell your story. And what we realized is like, look, as this industry finally is going to start growing, right, which it hasn't yet, like we're barely seeing the tip of the iceberg, and you know that because you just look outside and you don't see any drones flying around. So like that is not going to be the case in 5 or 10 years. You will not be driving around for days at a time not ever seeing drones doing work. And so as this industry gets going, what we're starting to see is real industrial application and enterprise adoption of this technology. So with this latest report, we wanted to show who is getting real ROI from drones now in these different sectors. And so it's a great report with, a bunch of large industrial energy companies, mining companies, agriculture companies that say, this is how we're using the technology, this is where we're deriving value from it, this is what's still stopping us, and so much of that is about workflow, and we'll get into all that stuff, but yeah.
So what was the application that surprised you in that commercial report that you had? You had plenty of them, especially with the oil and gas guys. But what is one application that maybe you had not seen or thought or talked about somewhere before?
That's a good question. We've been working with these guys so much that we kind of knew the applications that we're using. Right. But is there anything you can think of, Jason, that's kind of a surprising application that's in there?
I guess there's certain smart segments that are getting more mature faster, right? Obviously, construction is mature. You mentioned insurance or content creation, but oil and gas has really come up with unique ways, like CCOPs.
Yes, that's a great.
They basically sniff for certain types of chemicals. And so it's not just about visual sensors.
That's right.
It's not just about sensors in the spectrum.
That's a perfect one.
Other different types of sensors. Or we've talked a lot about confined space. People trying to figure out how to get drones into places that you can't even get people. But if they're small enough and the autonomy software is good enough and the sensor package is correct, those are matching up with use cases that people haven't been able to deal with in years.
And they're trying to figure out a way to create intrinsically safe indoor drones that can go into these gas environments.
Or like Percepto. Like Percepto is a drone and box company out of Israel that we work with, but some of their stuff is the company, people buy their stuff for security of industrial sites, but then realize, hey, while this thing's flying around securing my fence line, it also can go up on top of this thing that I normally have to send somebody up on top of that's really dangerous or boring or time consuming, and he can do it every week, and now I know, or he can sense the temperature of this generator that we had one blow up and it was a $20 million problem for us. Now he can actually take a temperature reading of all the generators every day, so we can see if we have a problem coming. So it's that predictive kind of analysis where customers are coming up with creative ways to use assets they have that they bought for another purpose, and they're not repurposing.
Yep, I think that's great. And the CCOPS one, to be clear, super cool story. NASA engineers, and they were part of a program where NASA was trying to bring kind of space technology into the enterprise, and they were working on ways of bringing their sensor packages that they were developing actually for Mars missions, and trying to develop ways to use those same sensor technologies in oil and gas, for instance. And they created a really, really accurate methane gas sensor, which they said, oh, we could just stick this thing on a drone and fly around and create a 3D model showing exactly where any methane gas is leaking, not just showing that it's leaking, but an exact flow of how much is coming out, how much they're losing, how serious the problem is. And what's really cool about it is, what we love is when people come at their problems, or coming from, there is a real problem in a given industry that I'm familiar with, I know what the workflow looks like, and I know that we could use drone technology to save time, money, do it more effectively. And so that's what these guys came out of that space, and they said we could just stick this thing on a drone, have it fly a lawnmower pattern, create a 3D model, and they're competing. Their current other mode of operation, or how people are trying to find methane gas leaks, is with two guys walking around with a FLIR camera, not a gas detection, an actual temperature sensing FLIR camera, which are great for a lot of use cases, but for looking for methane gas, it's very difficult. You're looking for like a flickering pixel in the image, and like, oh, that might be a leak. Whereas like CCOPS is able to show a very clear depiction of actual methane gas. And so that's a really cool one. Another one is a company, Civ Drones, out of Israel. Yeah, Civ Drone, they are civil engineers. They've been doing civil engineering for a long time. Part of civil engineering and doing these big roadway or large construction projects is you're putting a whole bunch of stakes in the ground. Different color stakes in very specific places, and they'll stake 500 stakes in the ground, and then they'll lay another layer of road, and then 2 days later they put another 700 stakes in the ground. They're in slightly different location, then they layer another layer, and apparently this is just a thing that is like every day they're putting hundreds and hundreds of stakes in the ground, and people walk around and tap in the ground. They're like, wow, we could build a drone that has like a magazine of stakes, and then we could put a little RFID encoder on the drone, so we could even be using like smart stakes. We could do the whole mission plan based on the engineering drawings, based on the different kind of the different layers and the different phases of this project, so you could pre-plan the whole thing. And now they're using these drones that fly around with RTK, and they're very accurately placing stakes in the ground, and they know exactly how much the industry is paying per stake to be stuck in the ground, every construction project in the world, and they're beating that number by like 10x. Wow. And they're doing it more accurately, and you can pay a little bit more, it's still 5x less, and you get a smart stake with an RFID tag that's fully scannable and can now be digitized by the VDM people, the BIM manager, stuff like that. So those are two examples that are like
very
outside the norm of just using an EO, an imaging sensor to create an orthomosaic or a 3D model or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be the most common.
That's right.
You
for
put
sure.
a camera on,
carry a
and
sensor
then
around
you
in 3D
add
space.
everything on top of that. So if you are talking about these drones flying over in 5 to 10 years, what kind of opportunities are people here? What kind of opportunities should they be looking for?
Well, I mean, it probably just depends on their background, what space they're in, what they want to be doing. But I think there's a huge opportunity in the space, and I think something that we'll see growing significantly. And I don't think it'll really be news to anyone here, but drones are just an autonomous robot that carries a sensor around in 3D space, right? And I always use this analogy of, if you had a big gymnasium floor and you needed to clean your floor every day, and you could either hire somebody to come out for $200 an hour and vacuum your floor, or you could buy a Roomba for $800 and have it do your floor for 2 pennies of electricity every day. Which would you choose, right? And so what's happening right now in the drone space is that you have Roombas operated by people that are very expensive. And that's a product of our regulatory environment, and you have to, we went from Section 333 where it was a 2-to-1 ratio of pilot, visual observer to drone. Now we're at a 1-to-1 ratio of a Part 107 pilot, but there's a lot of manual operation of charging batteries and getting data off cards, and the workflow is still very, very broken, and it requires people that really know what they're doing to do this effectively. And at Hangar, we've tried to do some things to kind of ease some of that, but really the drone is just a Roomba that is vacuuming data off the earth, right? It's really no different. And so as soon as the drone can be a Roomba at a construction site, and you have the as-planned documents being fed in automatically, the drone is taking visual imagery and creating a high-resolution, geo-rectified, RTK, like highly accurate 3D, scan of the construction site, and then just doing comparative analysis twice a day. Literally, it's like $1 of electricity a day or less to run the entire operation, including processing time. And now it's just a thing that just pops out of a box twice a day. And then the construction manager gets a notification that this pad was formed and the left side of it is 6 inches farther over than it's supposed to be, and before they even pour the concrete, based on where the form is, right? And then they can say, oh, well, that's just a parking lot, it's all good, it doesn't really matter, 6 inches. Or actually, that's important because we're putting a bunch of HVAC gear here, and we have a line running, so fix that before you pour the concrete. And 15 to 20% of a commercial construction site, and you're looking at 100, 200, $500 million commercial construction projects, 15 to 20% of the budget is for reworks. Because it's just a bunch of people doing the best they can and measuring things, and a bunch of different teams that it's all run on paper. I mean, it's like a highly difficult challenge to figure out, and it would require a major coordination of efforts. But when there's a drone in a box on the construction site or on the mine or on the farm, just scanning it twice a day. I think that'll be the next wave we see, is like private property, not flying over a bunch of public and just bystanders, and whether that's in mining, commercial construction, roadway projects, and agriculture. We'll just see drones in boxes. American Robotics, a company we work with out of Carnegie Mellon, they make a great solution specifically designed for agriculture. And part of that is that there's not great 4G coverage in the Midwest where all these farms are. And so they put a very powerful GPU-enabled graphics server in their ground station, in their autonomous drone station. The drone pops out, it's got a multispectral sensor on it. it captures 1,000 acres a day worth of imagery, does a high resolution or a high altitude, lower resolution scan, comes back, processes that data, then automatically analyzes the scan and says, these are 3 or 4 areas that may be trouble areas. Then the drone goes back out a couple hours later after charging and then does a low altitude, like 50-foot, ortho of those specific areas where they can zoom way in and go, yes, in fact, there is a problem here. Send the sprayer drone or the sprayer on the ground to just cover pesticide in this one small area. And that's all starting to happen like very autonomously. So I think autonomy and the fact that we are definitely heading in that direction. And that being said, there's always going to be a time for operational excellence and, eye in the sky, get this thing up, do a real-time inspection. We're not really sure what we're looking for. So, we really need a human in the loop for that type of stuff. And that will always exist. But, we'll start seeing drones flying around doing work when they're like delivering goods, delivering people, transporting people. But I think the delivery and the people moving and stuff like that, and we'll talk about lift aircraft at some point and the fact they've got a really interesting approach to getting people in these drones way sooner than like Ubering them from point A to point B. But I think first we'll see a bunch of autonomous twice a day, 3 times a day operation over private, sites.
One of the ones on the unique solutions that we have seen, just going back to that, is a company here we have seen at Capital Factory called Astral AR. I don't know if any of you have come across them.
Yeah.
But these guys were actually developing drones that could stop a bullet.
And how's it work?
And they had basically they had this material and came from R&D from various other universities that they could load the drone on, and then they had sensors looking for ammunition, looking for movement, looking for heat, and then being able to stop a bullet through that. A really cool demo a couple of years back at South by, and they're now working with various law enforcement organizations.
Was that the demo of the taser?
The demo was with the taser.
Yes.
Yeah, the demo.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Public perception was
Right.
top notch. Great. So the taser flying around.
Oh my god.
So lots of people are, again, right? There are things that are in this area where you're talking transportation, you're talking sensors, you're talking data collection. And of course, data collection leads to AI, ML, all of the other things that are possible through that.
And I think that's a great point, because people say, well, when is AI going to come into drones or ML? And right now in the world where you kind of use drones ad hoc, we need an inspection on Tuesday of next week for some compliance reason, whatever. And then come out again next month at some point. Like, you don't have consistent enough data sets to really be running comparative analysis on or to do any type of predictive, analytics, right? But when you have a drone popping out of a box that's flying the exact same mission twice a day, now your frequency of data collection, once your frequency goes way up and your consistency of the data goes way up, now you can start feeding it into AI engines and machine learning engines to do predictive analysis, change detection, things like that. And we're doing some of that at Hangar, where we can get the cost down enough to be getting enough data models to start doing some of that. But really, once you have a system that can just pop out and scan 2 or 3 times a day, every single day across an 18-month project, we're going to learn a lot. We don't even know what we're going to learn until we start analyzing those types of consistent, frequent data sets. And that's in our kind of investor memo or investment memo of the drone space. That's an area that we see growing the most over the next few years, because really AI and analytics is such a tiny part of the drone space now. Companies like Drone Deploy and Skycatch and others are baking some of those tools in, and you've got Neurala talking about AI on drones, but this is like very minor stuff. But we think, in 5 years from now, so much of what people are paying for is not just the information, but the insights gleaned from the information product, right? People could care less about a drone, right? No enterprise customer cares about your drone, right? I mean, it's like, help me understand what's happening at my site, help me understand if this is going according to plan, and AI and analytics are going to provide that in a way that has never before been seen. I think it's going to be like if we can take rework budgets from 15 to 20% of a construction site to 3 to 5% of a construction project, that's incredible, like massive savings across industry.
So what are some of the challenges that you have faced with Hanger when you're providing drones as a service?
Chris, you take that one.
What's that?
What are some of the challenges we face as Hanger in providing drones as a service?
Yeah, you know what was interesting is
And he's actually the perfect person to answer this because of his role at Hanger was specifically handling this problem.
Yeah. You know, the one, we kind of foresaw a lot of the technical challenges, I think. Everything from the logistical, like getting a drone on site, getting the right data captured consistently over time. But, you know, AI, need to build a big, huge data set before we can actually do anything with it. But the most difficult thing, I think the problem that we didn't foresee necessarily was the behavioral change that needed to take place on a construction site for these solutions to be useful. So, you know, as people maybe 10, 15 years from retirement, building buildings the same way their granddad did, those buildings are still standing. Why do I need to learn this new technology? Like, why are you wasting my time? And that was a big struggle, right? Finding ways to incentivize them to use it, really getting buy-in from top down. That was probably the biggest hurdle I was.
And to get them to even use the data sets that were coming in, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
their workflows are so, you know, kind of set in stone. I mean, they're still, everything's done on paper, you know.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And there's some phenomenal companies in the space like Procore and Autodesk and others that are pushing that change, kind of spearheading that for us, which is fantastic. But it's still a struggle.
Yeah.
Definitely. Anytime you're doing something massively disruptive, that's going to be a.
So I think that, and I also, you know, some of the other things we figured out was just the logistical challenge of, you know, we tried to make the workflow as seamless as possible, but you still have to like go out there with a charged battery. The weather has to be okay. You've got to put the drone down in the right place. The autonomous mission plan hopefully does not have it interacting with some new crane that was put up a week ago that wasn't on Google Maps or whatever. So there's always like that kind of logistical challenge of like get the flight done. Then it's like take the memory card out of the drone and upload the pictures, please.
That's
Right? The drone is not automatically sending it to the cloud, which in the future, I think actually our drones are probably going to get less sophisticated than they are now. I think we see drones getting more and more sophisticated, more and more sensors, simultaneous localization and mapping technology, real-time decision making. We've got drones with, you know, TX2 processors, you know, Neurala running on board, all this great stuff. But what happens when 5G gives us a very consistent, low latency, high bandwidth connection to a cloud GPU-enabled server, right? Which is just a fraction of the processing cost. Right now, the drone literally just needs to be a flying sensor with a high-speed connection to the cloud. And now you can be using the visual imagery coming off of the drone to make real-time guidance, navigation, control decisions, to scan in real time. We're not going to have that issue of pulling the memory card out. It's just going to be, as you're collecting data, it's just going straight into a cloud, building a map in real time. While the drone is still in the air, it could come back and do a low altitude scan of some issue that it picked up on its first, you know, 300-foot lawnmower pattern. So, you know, that a lot of it is just around the logistical complexities of using what was really designed to be a consumer drone to fly around and get cool shots of your wedding or your vacation or something like that, and adapting that into these enterprise workflows. You know, it was, luckily we have a relationship with DJI, and we were able to get DJI to let us put a meta tag on all of the images that we were taking with the drone, so we could get our pilots to just upload into a big folder, and then we could parse out what projects they were associated with and things like that. But even just getting that done was like getting it was like an act of Congress, you know. And
okay,
so
that's actually a good question. Act of Congress. What are some of the regulations that you are seeing, or what are some of the deregulations that will help the industry?
So I did fly a drone in a congressional hearing in 2015. First person to fly a drone inside the hearing. We did lose connection, and we faked it really well. It was a bebop. I didn't want to fly an Iris Plus because that would have been a little bit big.
Yeah.
So we were flying a bebop. We're like, this is a commercial drone. It can do all this stuff. Like, you guys think of commercial drones as these big giant things. Like, this little tiny thing could save lives. It's flying, it loses Wi-Fi connection. And so it's like, and you know, all you do is just grab it, flip it over, and you know, they're that great. And it was like, oh, geez. It was just drifting into the audience.
That one is set back the industry like, oh my gosh.
So it's on C-SPAN, you can watch it. When we grab the drone and flip it over, that was not on purpose. But yeah, you know, at that time, it's interesting because the regulation, and I think we're all in such a habit of saying regulation, regulation, regulation is holding us back. And I think we're finally actually reaching this inflection point where, like, oh shit, we may need to catch up with regulation.
Yeah.
Because regulation's actually happening now, and our workflows are still totally broken. You know, it takes like a tech department within a company, an innovation team, to be like, cool, my job is I get to go learn about drones for the next 2 years. Like, it takes that type of individual. You can't just go to a BDM person or a BIM manager and go, here's a drone, good luck. And so with regulation, you know, Emmanuel, one of the pioneers in this industry from Flying Cam, won an Oscar for technological achievement in film in 1996, flying a remote control helicopter with an RE-235 film camera, no autopilot, gas-powered helicopter, you know, and they were shooting all the Harry Potter movies and early Mission Impossible and stuff like that. And so people have been doing this for more than 20 years. Okay. And, you know, the FAA just kept telling us, you can't use these things commercially. We're working on the regulations, they're coming, but for now, don't use them commercially. So for 20 years, they said that, you know, for 17 years, whatever. And then we started shipping Phantoms. Then we started shipping like 50,000 Phantoms a month, right? And then it was like, oh crap, we gotta deal with this. Yeah. Because now there's all these drones that are just getting used. Because there was really nothing they could do because there was no actual law against using it. It's just you weren't allowed to do it by like a civil agency. And Jason, you know a lot more about this than I do.
FAA doesn't have an enforcement capability.
They don't have, they're not an enforcement agency. That's right. So they could try and do a civil suit, and they even did, they tried to do a civil suit against Trappy in like 2014 or something. Brendan Schulman, it's funny, that's how we got Brendan into the industry, and now he's like runs legal at DJI. But that didn't even work. Even Trappy, the way he was flying at University of Virginia was very, very dangerous, and they were like, okay, this is gonna stick, and it didn't. And so the FAA was like, okay, we gotta figure out something here. So in 2015, when we testified for Congress about, hey, these are these regulations, whatever, at that point, there was 13 companies that had gotten a Section 333 exemption. It was like Lockheed, Boeing, Airbus, Department of Homeland, you know, Security, like these big, massive organizations. And I think we kind of opened up their eyes a little bit at that time. We formed the Small UAV Coalition with Aiken Gump out in New York. We brought in GoPro, Parrot, 3DR, and DJI to get that started. And we started putting some money into, you know, telling the story. By the end of 2015, there was like 5,500 Section 333s granted. So that really started ramping things up. We saw Part 107 coming, then Part 107 hit. So we've now seen this is how regulation takes place and comes along. And we now see them giving exemptions for beyond visual line of sight operation. So we know that flight over people, flight at night, and beyond visual line of sight applications are within 18 to 24 months. You know, I mean, this is coming. This is not gonna, you know, you see Amazon and Google Wing and Uber Eats putting out their requests for doing their tests. Like Workhorse is working with UPS on their little truck that a driver can take a package while the drone takes a package, and you know, kind of work as a pair. So I mean, it's like this stuff is coming. I don't think regulation is the long pole in the tent anymore.
Okay. So are, on a different note, are there platform companies that are doing well in this area? Let's say for drone software. There used to be a company called Airware. I don't see them anymore.
That was from Kleiner, right? Perkins invested in that.
Right, right.
Well, so Airware is an interesting one, you know, and there's been, you know, a couple of these big companies that have gone under. I think so. Jonathan's parents were 747 pilots,
right?
And I think when the industry started getting going, Jonathan's dad was like, "No way, the FAA is going to let these things fly in their current form." We were shipping Phantom 1s at the time, and they were like, "No chance the FAA is going to let a drone like that fly. It's going to need to be like a full-size aircraft." and it's going to need to have the same manuals and documentation and training and triple redundancy and all this stuff. So they said, okay, we're going to develop the operating system that will allow for commercial use of drones. That bet didn't work out because the FAA started, the #1 commercial drone was the Phantom 2 and then the Phantom 3. And today the #1 commercial drone is probably a Mavic or a Phantom 4. So they made some pivots and some changes, but ultimately, and I think it was not necessarily a bad bet to make. And had the FAA said, no freaking way we're ever going to let these little consumer drones flying around the national airspace, you're going to need a aviation grade autopilot with manuals, this, that, and the other. Airware would have been perfectly positioned to capture that whole market. That's kind of really what happened with Airware. And I think you do see, a lot of software platform players like AirMap, and so a huge unsolved problem that will not be solved by one company, that will be solved by a number of very talented companies providing different sensor fusion inputs is UTM, right? Unmanned traffic management. Yeah. And this is a problem that we're gonna help solve autonomous vehicles on the road, right? Autonomous cars have a much, much more difficult challenge because they're integrating into 2D space with an existing infrastructure designed for human operation, pedestrians walking around all over the place, all kinds of things that can go wrong, right? Whereas for a drone, we have open air, and we have multiple layers in the Z-axis that we can operate within, and every single drone is fully autonomous and fully connected to the cloud, even if it's only through its link to the ground, which is using a hand computer connected to the cloud, right? So, the problem that we're solving for UTM in the sky is just a much, much simpler, easier problem. And I think that the autonomous driving industry and challenge will glean a lot from what we learned putting in, thousands of autonomous drones in the sky. But UTM, unmanned traffic management, there's companies like AirMap, there's Precision Hawk's Lattice system, NASA Urban Skyways. But there's going to be a lot of companies. Now drones will have ADS-B transponders. As of January, all private aviation, every single plane, even if you're a crop duster, you have to have an ADS-B transponder reporting your position, heading, speed, etc. And so when every single drone has that, and every single aircraft has that, now you have all the data coming in about where everything is that's flying in the sky. And then you start, and that's where AI, machine learning, all that just really starts coming in. Because then it'll be like, you have a conflict 7 days from now because these two flight plans are getting a little too close to each other. Someone needs to make a change. It's like we're going to know things way, way in advance. And I think that's where precision autonomy and the fact that you guys are figuring out how to ensure this incredibly complex problem is really key.
From our perspective, one of the enablers is clearly around ensuring this environment, because that's one of the risks that isn't always clear. And frankly, insurance has almost always been a proxy for regulation. The horseless carriage would never be where it is today without that. So we're modeling for ensuring those environments on a real-time basis.
Yeah, because how does regulation work if I think expand on that a little bit, because when you say in the past insurance has always been a proxy for regulations, hey, if somebody's insuring it, that kind of helps spur along the regulation or kind of acts in place of regulation?
And in a lot of ways, and we see this in Singapore and Hong Kong, but the regulation isn't really there. They just say you must be insured, right? So they're saying we don't really know what to do with this, but you need to be insured. And anybody who flies drones now would know that, because there are huge organizations that are experiencing the risk, right? So people might know this whole Gatwick thing in the UK, that ended up with a $150 million claim for ground stop because one drone was flying around the airport. So if you're Amazon or if you're an energy company and say, gee, am I deploying drones? Am I wearing a $150 million exposure? I better insure against that. Right? So we're seeing a lot of attention to those types of things.
And insuring against that is not a super straightforward thing for a lot of these organizations that don't necessarily understand the tech. And I think what's cool about what Precision Autonomy is doing is they're bringing in all this sensor data in real time, all these telemetry streams, and using AI to figure out what is the risk profile of this particular flight on this particular day, flown by this pilot, using this sensor payload, using this drone, based on all these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of flight hours from their years of doing this in Australia and other markets. they can really figure out what the risk profile is of a given flight, and then now they can offer insurance by the minute, depending on who's flying it, what's being flown, where it's being flown, all of that. And so using that level, because like you said, the horseless carriage, we didn't have 57 different streams of telemetry coming from that device. So we just knew that it was being driven on a road, right? But now these things are autonomous. We know everything. We know the weather conditions. We know what the you know, what was happening on the ground. We know if there was other operators. We know if there was a live event happening nearby they're not supposed to be flying by. And like, you know, we know so much more now, and so tapping into that information is super interesting.
Before I jump to audience questions, I want to give an opportunity to anybody who's working on a drone startup here to just briefly
Yeah, it'd be great.
tell about your startup, right? You want to start with Pensa?
Yeah, okay, well, I'm kind of part of two startups,
Right,
right? I'm
okay.
a part of my startup, and then I'm
Okay.
working at Pensa.
All right,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
we can talk about both.
let's see, Pensa, what we do there right now, or at least what I can disclose, is we're basically building drones that count like inventory in like retail and warehouse environments using some pretty sophisticated machine vision. And what I'm doing is I'm working on a 360 drone, which is probably going to either be based on the Rilo 360 camera or the Insta 360 Evo. So it's going to be a little bit like the Phantom, building for the GoPro, except for a 360 camera.
360.
That's-
Awesome.
Awesome. Anybody else?
Very cool.
Yeah, good.
Cool. My name is Nick Badancia. I'm the co-founder of Drone Parks Worldwide. I drove 3 hours to come see my boy Colin.
What's up,
Wynn.
Nick?
We're in the drone entertainment space, so our goal is to build permanent indoor drone centers where anyone can come and learn how to fly a drone for fun. Think K1 Speedway, but for drones. So, Colin, thank you for your support over the last 3 years. You are the founder of the drone industry as we know it. So,
Man, no, I just was
Thank
at
you.
the right place at the right time. Interestingly and ironically, we were having lunch with Amber Allen today, CEO of AA Labs, and they do these massive events, and they want to start figuring out that for like EA and other gaming companies, they launched the HTC Vive big event. They did the Ready Player One event at South by Southwest a couple of years ago. They're like super legit event planning company. They're like, we got to bring drones into these gaming events, and I was like, let me introduce you to Drone Parks Worldwide, because these guys know how to set this up. They can teach people how to do it, have a training, maybe like every hour on the hour, some pro drone racer does an incredible
maybe
thing.
like this one here to
broadcast.
my right, this guy.
Hi. I'm Gil. I'm just here in the back. I race drones professionally.
Awesome.
ESPN, all that, world champion since 2016. That's cool.
Badass.
Go ahead.
YouTube, haven't I?
Yeah.
You can look me up on YouTube.
Yeah, I see you.
It's 32 bits of Gil.
Of course, we call him 32 bits of God.
Awesome. Awesome.
My name is Luke, and I'm with Uco Robotics in Canada, so I flew here for this event.
Come on!
And we're essentially doing Roomba, but for raising chickens. So it's an autonomous, self-moving barn. So instead of creating automation for industrial ag, we're sort of creating automation to bridge the gap between industrial ag and traditional agriculture. So nice to be short.
And the name is Rova, R-O-V-A?
Rova, yes, R-O-V-A.
So the barn moves?
Yes, it moves unpastured. So it's like a big shelter with no floor. So
Wow.
it moves itself. It removes 90% of the labor of a small scale producer.
Wow. Very cool.
This is a ground drone, but we also have done it with flying drones. We make games on drones.
Oh, so nice.
Yeah.
He's one of our latest capital factory companies. So.
Yeah, so we came over from China.
So what do you do with like the blaster? You got the jumping spider.
Yeah, it's like essentially same with the flying drones. The drone autonomously finds you. Essentially, so you
Yep.
shoot it. Yeah, and it can shoot you like laser tag. But what we're
They're
doing.
not learning, are they?
Not yet. Not yet.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're also looking at some like augmented reality in addition, so where the drone is also throwing augmented reality stuff at you.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I had a similar conversation at that lunch today with Amber, talking about kind of a gaming experience that I think would be so cool is like being in an FPV headset, but having a digital feed that you could drop in AR elements into, and people around the world could be racing in one course. And imagine like FPV flying, chasing other kind of avatars. If you could get the latency low enough, maybe it's not quite as fast as like real FPV racing, but you're doing this with Mavics or something like that. And imagine you're flying along and you get someone missile locks on you, shoots you, and then your drone in actual space just like spins around really fast 5 times, and then you're kind of disoriented, it's hovering, and then you got to kind of rejoin the race. Like how visceral that experience would be. But yeah, we're gaming and VR and AR and like real world flying around in real space, but having AR elements around, like that's going to be cool, and that's definitely coming.
That sounds awesome. What about actually weaponizing drones? Is that illegal? I mean,
We'll wait for questions. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
My name is Mark Schuck. I'm the VP of Engineering for H2 Dynamics here in Austin. And we do hydrogen fuel cell technology for long endurance flight. We can fly for almost 4 hours versus minutes. Gil's actually our test pilot.
Awesome.
So we developed our own large drone here, but we also sell our fuel cells to other drone companies to integrate on some drones.
Excellent.
And I believe you've spoken to our CEO.
Yeah, I think he was over at the office recently.
Well, not here in Austin.
Okay.
But yeah, they're based in Singapore, and we do the engineering and R&D for the drones integration here in the U.S.
Yeah, we've been working on the Doosan mobility drone. Yes, I know we've talked.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Go ahead.
Yeah. My name's Troy. I have a company started up a couple months back called Quad Standard Labs. Been in the space 5 or 6 years, just working for various projects. We've come across a couple of people. We know Kevin Finisterre is a mutual friend.
Oh, my man!
Yeah,
Kevin.
so I honestly followed you quite a bit. And what we're doing is we work with different clients. So I have clients, Drone Genius, which is a local camps. They put on different drone camps and things. We're working on projects with them on expanding to different products and building their own products. We're working with companies in the secure drone space as far as securing cloud data. We have a client that we're working with developing their hardware for their software. And then just finding synergy between those projects and bringing other clients on board that we work with on developing either whatever their project is, and just finding those newfound potentials kind of
very
from
cool.
the stuff that you talked about.
And you're here in Austin?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
wow.
based here out of Austin.
Yeah,
And you
come
have
by the
a-
office.
You actually gave me a tour of the 3DR space. So my 3DR Solo hit the clock tower and was the one that forced Philip to call me in the middle of the night. He actually on a call last week told me I needed to talk to you about some gimbal stuff that we were talking about. So
we should have a lunch soon.
Yeah,
for sure.
we should talk about that.
And you have a connection to UT, you said?
So I worked on a team last year with another company I was with for the Alpha Pilot Challenge. So I worked with the team, the UT Aerial Robotics team. Yeah, those guys, they're awesome. One of them just took off and actually went to work for Bell.
Yeah, Eric, the guy who started it.
Yeah, Eric Johnson, yeah. So just know those guys. Just, yeah.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Anybody else before we start questions? Go ahead.
Yes, Jason McCown, I'm here with Skyways. We're here in the Austin area. We do cargo drones. So we've actually developed a VTOL plane, hardware in-house. It's 18-foot wingspan, 20-pound payload. So it takes off vertically and then transitions into a plane. So we've been working with the DoD for a while, and we're trying to transition into commercial markets as the regulations start to be more friendly towards that environment.
Yeah, you guys are doing some super cool stuff.
Yeah, awesome.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Last one, I think. Andrew Aubrey, CEO of C-Hubs, probably covered us a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit. Initially, we started with a sensor package, which we developed through research going back to 2012, and we figured out that could solve a lot of the hard problems with the oil and gas industry, particularly when integrated on ground robots or a drone. So that's really, we started with a hard problem, had the technology to solve it, and we've been deploying, specifically focused on oil and gas for about 3 years now.
Super cool. I didn't even know you were in the room when I was talking about you. I probably would have like done a better job.
He said good stuff.
Okay, good.
Cool. Okay, now we can keep it open
Mark,
for
you gotta
questions.
at least talk.
Or, yeah,
I
go
think,
ahead, yeah.
some of this was already commented on, but I'm Mark Goverson, I'm the CEO of Precision Autonomy. We're an insurtech firm focused on autonomous devices. So Colin did a nice job of describing that. We have been operating in Asia, and we're launching in the US in the next month. So anybody that flies drones or is a manufacturer, we literally have APIs that plug into that in order to take data, certainly from the machine, but we look at human factors, machine factors, and environmental factors to rate the risk and make it accurate. So that people who are good at what they do pay less.
So that wouldn't apply to anyone here. So
I'll experiment. Okay, now we can open to questions, and you were raising questions.
Yeah,
Something
there's a
in
lot.
between, or?
One, for things in the past that we've done and we've gotten better, you'd be able to know we were bad in the past and then got better, and then you'd be able to calculate our risk factor and our insurance then, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will offer us, historical information in order to get initial ratings. So.
Cool.
Yeah, and I was asking about if you were weaponizing drones, is that something somebody's working on right now that you can legally sell? Like, you can buy a big old gun, so why not buy a drone with one already?
I think people have messed around with that. I mean, there's definitely like flight dynamic issues for the autopilot with like the high G loads from recoil.
Yeah, recoil.
The weight of the systems are pretty heavy compared to like a visual sensor. And I think like my guess, and Jason, he was the commander of his Force Recon unit, and they were first into Fallujah. He's used a lot of drones in real world battlefield scenarios, but my guess is that like it's maybe just not as practical of a way of carrying a weapon than other potential means. Or
The only field system that's small is the LMAMs, which is a.
Well, there you go. That's true.
Drone with explosive on air environment and a great pivot. They're pretty much the program record holder with the Raven and Puma.
And LMAMs is loitering munition,
It's,
something.
I forget what it is, but it used to be Switchblade. It's LMAMs now, but it's a lightweight munition. But basically, it's a small drone you put in your backpack that somebody can fly over the hill, and if they want to deploy it, it's essentially the effect of a hand grenade. But it's not like a publicly available or commercially available.
But that's an interesting thing because then like the way you describe that is like if I lose it, I'm not in trouble because it's like the category of it. It's a
the way the defense budget works, you have procurement money, and then you have money for like things that are disposable or classified as ammunition, and once it's gone, it's gone. So a lot of times they're looking at how expensive is this thing that this person is deploying, and do I need somebody to go find it if it gets lost? Does that cost more than a human to go and recover, whereas this thing is disposable effectively, and we can create more being a munition is sometimes gives some favorability in deployment. But there are even police departments and security firms, nobody really arms. From a payload perspective, from a recoil perspective, all the same reasons, they do have drones like that, Autonomy that does the one that has the lights and the sirens and follow the guy, like if it finds somebody in a warehouse situation who's not supposed to be there, but nobody currently commercially.
their EWAT has their flamethrower drone. The drone will like, and it's actually an interesting use case, and they are using it in Asia right now because if like big branches fall on power lines and they're very difficult to get to, they can fly this giant drone up there and blast it with a flamethrower, and it doesn't hurt the power lines apparently. Like and the branch burns up and falls off the power line, and they're all good. And so there's a flamethrower drone.
Let's run insurance on that one.
More so common hobby style, so I'm thinking just go.
That's the LMAMs.
That's right, boom. Perfect.
Yep.
That's great. Wow.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So, you started this kind of revolution with the gimbal, and essentially that was like the core.
I think it was like autopilot, and then gimbal,
autopilot,
and then autonomous flight.
My question is, as you were saying with the 5G going forward, and then the drones will become more minimalistic, do you foresee a situation where a commercial drone like a DJI in some form factor will be basically the overall solution for both commercial, like from a physical standpoint?
That's a great question. That's an awesome question, and no. And here's why. Here's why. So, as long as the regulatory environment dictates that a person has to be there anyways, and you have to fly it within visual line of sight, because we've been in these product development meetings, right? And the number of times that we say, well, there's a guy there anyways, or there's a girl there anyways flying the drone, so he or she can replace the battery. And it really only needs to fly for like 30 minutes. And we don't need a real good cloud connection because they're putting it back into a case anyways. They can just pull the memory card out. And so the number of times that you make these decisions based on what's the cost of this, how is this going to affect the cost of the system to do this cool thing, and you can just lean on there anyways, and the fact, you're like, well, they'll just do that, and now we can get the cost down, right? And so as long as the regulatory environment is such that drones are made to be flown in this general vicinity, and they pretty much carry a visual sensor around, and they pretty much have replaceable batteries, then like the size and shape of the drone doesn't vary super widely. But as soon as we can deliver 50-pound packages to ships offshore or to oil rigs, and as soon as we can put people in drones, and as soon as we have professional racing of drones, now all of a sudden drones start looking very different, right? And so I think we're going to see a wide array of different sizes and shapes of drones. Look at Impossible Aerospace and the US-1, right? That's a drone specifically for local law enforcement and first responders that need to be up in the air for 2 hours. And so there's some Tesla engineers that worked on the Tesla batteries that said, let's just make a flying battery. Yeah. And it's essentially a 1.2 kilowatt hour 18650 pack where the collector plates are the frame of the drone. And it flies for a super long time, but you can't travel with that in a plane. It's a 1.2 kilowatt hour battery, right? There's no replaceable battery on that. It's a drone that you need in a certain situation to fly for 2 hours, right? You got H3, you got DMI making drones that are flying on compressed hydrogen gas that need to fly for 3 hours. And so, you know, I think as the regulatory environment starts to open up and we can fly these things farther, we're flying to South Africa in 2 weeks to go meet with Alti, who has drones that range from, you know, 6-foot wingspan drones to, what's their biggest one? 18?
Biggest one's like 177 pounds and like a
12 meter.
12 meter.
Yeah, so 36-foot wingspan, 40-foot wingspan. It flies for, you know, 24 hours, something like that. And so these drones are going to really start varying significantly. Even their 55-pound drone, their 54.9-pound drone, flies for 12 or 14 hours on a electric hybrid drivetrain. It's a VTOL fixed wing. So, you know, Elroy Air, they're working on a big, heavy payload delivery drone that they want to eventually do manned flight. You know, Bell, Airbus, the Bahana flight, whatever. I mean, so I think, you know, and then even like with some of the stuff that Jason was talking about with flying indoors, you know, you have flyability, you have, before Sci-Fi Works went away, they were working on a little indoor tethered solution that could potentially be intrinsically safe. And so I think we're going to do exactly the opposite. We go from like these, basically a way to fly for 30 minutes with a visual sensor, and you got Phantom, Mavic, Inspire, Matrice. They all look pretty similar. They're not crazy different. You fast forward 5 years, and it's all going to be about what are you using this exact drone for. And drones, I think, are going to become much more single purpose. This is a drone for a construction site. It's got this type of sensor. It handles dust. It does X, Y, and Z. This is a drone for agriculture. It's got a multispectral sensor. It's got a GPU-enabled, you know, server at the box because it's only uploading the process base map over 3G, which is only a 30 meg file versus terabyte of data. And so all these solutions are becoming more and more narrowly defined for the exact use case that they're doing. There's a company that we're working with that's putting a little non-destructive test unit on the front of a drone, and then it kind of rolls up a wind turbine blade doing NDT, non-destructive testing of the, you know, below the surface of a wind turbine to see like subsurface cracks and things like that. You're not gonna use that drone for anything else, but they want to put a box in a wind farm, and it can essentially inspect 1 to 2 wind turbines a day, and once a year each wind turbine gets inspected if it's in an area that it can service 300 different wind turbines, right? And so I think it's gonna, yeah, they're gonna be highly specialized. Yeah. kind of, I guess, opposite of like mobile phones, which now they all pretty much look the same.
Yeah.
I mean, you even look at delivery drones, the ones that Google, Uber, and Amazon introduced, each model's completely different than the other. And
That's
they all
right.
do delivery, but they're all different models.
And even just the delivery of a 50 or 100-pound payload out to an oil rig, a replacement part or something like that, versus delivering a 5-pound package, last mile delivery, they're all gonna be totally different. Yeah.
Go ahead.
What is your take on the DoD moratorium, specifically leveraged at DJI?
My take is,
It wasn't really followed for a period of time. There's a senator out of Connecticut who's been behind this, basically been like, hey, if you say you're not gonna do this, then don't do it, buy American. But what more interestingly came out of all of that is, yes, there's a moratorium on DJI, and DHS says there's some cybersecurity issues, but it's the declaration that small UAS are now essential to the smaller industrial base, essential to the national security industrial base. So when the government said there's a Defense Production Act of 1950, which basically says you can declare certain things essential, that someone else, a dominant foreign power, can do this better than you can. And we're worried, and we need to invest government funds in capacity or capability in order to compete. That happened like 4 weeks ago. Then 3 or 4 days ago, an RFI came out from the Air Force that said, hey, all you companies that are consider yourself part of this industrial base for small UAS, we know data links, processing of images, gimbals and payloads, innovative airframes. There's 6 designated areas. We need your input by the end of September because we're building an investment roadmap for how we're going to fix this problem. So it's been declared to be a national security issue, the fact that we are outpaced and that they want to secure the supply line. They don't want, well, we're buying, every drone company, even the American ones, are buying stuff from other countries. Or you look at Parrot, who is considered to be a military drone company, they're buying components out of China. And so the way to do this is by saying this is a national guard, this is important. And it's no different than like battleships or something else. You say, hey, we don't have enough of these, we don't have the capacity. It's a capacity issue, because we work with most of the US drone companies in this small space. And we've said to ourselves a number of times, you know what would be great is if they all just actually sat down around a table and said, you're good at this, and you're good at this, and you're good at this. We should build one company and try to compete as opposed to all of us investing redundant resources and building very similar things that have slight differences. But that doesn't happen in a venture capital climate usually, unless all their VCs also get together and have that same conversation. But the government may try to force that conversation by saying we want open source, open architecture stuff. We're asking for your input, and we just did a video before we came here about, hey, like, you should reply if you're a drone company in this space with capability or capacity in those 6 areas. Get your input in, because at some point the government's going to come out with their plan. And at least they're asking, because sometimes they don't ask. They already did their study and said, this is important, but now they're asking, hey, give us some input, because we really want to know where should we put money, that either money or process will be freed up, R&D money, investment money, like buying machines, maybe even acquiring and making companies get together. These are all things that are on the table once you declare something essential to national security as far from an industrial perspective. So that all started with these memos saying, don't use DJI anymore, they may be transmitting information back to China, or they may cut off the supply chain, whatever. So it's an interesting time to be in the US.
They seem to be taking it pretty seriously. And like much more so than they were a year ago when it first started kind of rolling out.
Well, look at the SRR OTA, right? Never before has US government procured or done an OTA to 6 small companies.
What's an
to say,
OTA?
you're gonna make the platoon drone for the Army. And right now they're in a down select to 2 by the end of the year. And but they used a non-traditional vehicle, DIU led it with the Army. They're being really helpful to the different competitors, more so than you would in a normal program of record. And so they are trying to the US government is trying to influence this process to say, hey, like, we need to get here faster. Because the capability side, people are investing in, but the capacity side, none of those US drone companies that are participating in that competition have sold more than 1,000 drones a pop. Like, none of them. So you're looking at DJI selling 15,000 drones a month into this country, and then they're doing like, all combined, they got like 5,000 ever. So obviously there's a capacity issue there.
So follow along with that, with the, I guess, the work that's been done with the Department of Interior, that whole, I guess, them trying to go leverage that department to go bypass that moratorium, are you seeing the DoD really just wad that up and chuck it in the trash, or?
I mean, the DoD has programs of record with American companies, right? They can buy stuff to test, and special operations forces in particular can buy try, decide stuff, but in terms of programs of record, which is really like the meat and potatoes of the defense industry, those are still like AeroVironment, General Atomics. I mean, those are your legit drone programs. So soldier borne sensor, which is FLIR, FLIR 1, and that's the little Black Hornet, that little tiny thermal fits in the ball in your hand, helicopter looking thing. I mean, that's they bought a foreign company.
Which can we get a discount on one of those?
Yeah.
Can we just, you need some social media influencers, like, let's talk.
So the programs of record are still American. There's not a DJI Phantom program of record. Department of Interior bought 3DR product.
Yeah, Solos.
And they bought some other product, but Department of Interior is a different use case. Not every federal government agency has to follow that. That was specifically DHS said this could be a problem for critical infrastructure. The Army said, or DOD said, don't buy it anymore without a waiver, because the Marine Corps was buying instant eye, marked whatevers. So, but there has not been an official program to say, hey, this deployed DJI Phantoms or DJI Inspires or anything like that.
So, and getting back to the specialization, do you think, like, when you guys talk to your clients as far as future-proofing their own market, for some, so to speak, my question was revolving around, do you think it's important for companies to specifically look at the technology as far as a way to follow and use what's given to them as a tool? Or do you often encourage your clients to actually pursue the development path of developing and setting the standard by finding the use case for the drone in their market and then providing that as the standard solution, if you would?
Yeah, so I think I understand the question. I guess, let me know if this makes sense as an answer. I would say—
I ask weird questions.
Well, what we tend to suggest is develop products based on truly identified and validated problems that need to be solved. Real world issues that exist that you can apply drone technology to solve or make better in some way, right? And I think what we see a lot of we may only have 20 clients at a time, but we've talked to most companies in this space, and what we see a lot of are really intelligent engineering teams that are like, we figured out a way to carry a whatever on a drone, or it's
a pickle bucket.
Yeah.
It's like, pickles need to fly?
Yeah, it's like, and it was a really difficult challenge to figure out the control algorithm for this. And one that's like a little bit on that edge is VRT. It's a very cool design with like a variable rotors, all 4 rotors. And it's kind of like that Ready Player One. You remember when the drone delivers the pizza, and it's like, whir, and all the rotors are moving independently. And they developed this, and they want to be able to keep the platform of the drone, the airframe, perfectly level. So this one, I can't really decide, like, chicken come before the egg here, or the egg first, what was it? Because, they want to put these robotic arms to be able to go in and do work, or do non-destructive testing, and go in and touch, walls or things that they want to take measurements off of. But to me, it's like, with something like that, it's like, I would want to really validate that there is a market that is in need of drones that fly with a perfectly level airframe.
Yep.
Because you really actually need to put a drill on the thing, and so it's like, when we start hearing like, you could do this with it, you could do that, it would be awesome. It's like, okay, have you talked to like 7 or 8 of those customers that are like, man, we really need to do that with our drone? So I don't know if that answers the question, but
it's application versus what can be done.
Yeah, and I guess also what I was asking was, if you had the choice of, again, companies not wanting to dive into drone technology or automated technologies is because they don't understand it, is do they wait for somebody like you to develop your drone and say, hey, I have a drone that'll solve your solution, or do you encourage them to develop their own systems by maybe bringing R&D in-house or contracting out R&D?
Yeah, all depends on how big their need is, right? So we actually built Amazon's first delivery drones back when it was just a media stunt, and they were just Pixoc-enabled, octocopters, and then all of a sudden when they started running the numbers on it, they're like, actually, we can deliver a 5-pound package for X amount of watts compared to a vehicle on the road or something like that. Like, they're like, this is going to be a thing. And then they created Amazon Prime Air. They hired a bunch of engineers, and they started building their own drones. Telstra is almost kind of like in between. Telstra is like, they've got 40 drone pilots flying around inspecting their cell phone towers in Australia. And they're getting to the point, I think once your program gets to the point where it's big enough, it all is just based on what is your need and what available technologies are out there that you can piece together. Because really, likely you're piecing together some, and really you're building a workflow to get to some answer. And I would say only in the case where you're like, but there's just not a thing that exists that does this really critical part of our workflow. And so to build a funky looking drone that has the props upside down so that we can carry the thing on top or whatever, then in that case, okay, maybe it makes sense to do that.
Makes sense.
But most of it's a legitimate use case that's generating an ROI.
Yes.
That people can look at, calculate, and say, yep, I'm going to do it this way versus the way I've been doing it.
That's right. And I like it when you talk to those customers and go, if we were to build you this thing that did this, and I could get it to you in 9 months, would you buy it from us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last question. So,
Yeah, I'm just curious, who's helping facilitate the building of the ecosystem for this space, right? I mean, clearly there's evidence that there's interest, right? So Austin seems to be a great place for a lot of us that are here to
That's right.
sort of be a cornerstone of autonomous devices, robotics, and drones. So how does that? How do we as a group bring that together? How does Capital Factory play a role in that?
It's a great question, Brant.
Excellent. Yeah, it's like Brant is right there. Go ahead, Brant.
Yeah, so I think for me, like that need has, I've been talking about for years the fact that Austin, especially per capita, is like, it's the place for drones. I mean, yes, there are probably more drone startups in San Francisco, which, but per capita, I think we definitely hold our own. And the fact that we have the Texas Triangle right here, and not just from a customer standpoint or a developer standpoint or the cost of living or engineering talent, any of that, it's like whatever type you want to do a drone that flies offshore and lands on ships, you want to make a drone that inspects pipeline or power line, you want to make a drone that's used for urban environments. We have all the environments in Texas. It's all right here within a 2 or 3 hour drive for testing, development, etc. And so we have often talked about creating some kind of incubator in Austin that would bring in, I see it as a place that a new drone startup could spend their first 18 months developing their MVP, being able to go outside, fly, come back in, tweak, go outside, fly, come back in, tweak, talk to other companies in the space, have a shared lab with some 3D printing capabilities, some prototyping capabilities. And then once you have real customers and real revenue, and then you go raise your big A round and you're going to build a 20-person team, then go find another office space, And I think this industry, again, it's like the tip of the iceberg. This is going to be massive, and I would love to see Austin be the place for drone tech, because it is way more conducive environment to fly here than it is to fly in San Francisco.
Yeah. How many of you are familiar with Brant here? How many of you know Brant? Everybody in this room should know Brant. Brant runs, or you want to talk about yourself?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. My background's in drone tech, but here at Capital Factory, I've been here for 4 years and run our emerging tech programs, basically translating tech speak to business speak. I work with a lot of our corporate and government partners, helping bridge the gap. I basically get paid to geek out on this shit, so. But yeah, we've been talking with Colin and Jason at Capital Factory, basically just wanting to litmus test a little bit what the environment here is like and what the ecosystem's like and how we can better support it. So this is the first of several big events in the drone robotics space. So thanks for signing up, thanks for coming, and stay tuned for more stuff. You can email me, brants@capitalfactory.com, spelled like France but with a B. But I'm here every day, so looking forward to meeting more of you guys and seeing this ecosystem continue to grow.
Show of hands, who would be interested in being a part of something like that? Yeah, anywhere from like 1 seat to 3 seats to 5 to 10 seats, something like that. I think we could fill up an office space pretty quick.
Excellent. This was great.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.